Well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning. I'm Monica Smith. I'm co-creator of Revel 11 along with Joni Parsons. And we started Revel 11 over 6 years ago with the goal of hosting events and experiences with meaningful conversations, authentic conversations about topics that are important to us. And self-confidence is one of the most important gifts that we can give ourselves. And today we will delve into how to do this with Homaira Kabir. I'm so excited. Homaira holds a master's degree, more than one, in coaching psychology, as well as positive psychology, which is the science of human flourishing and well-being. You've got to love that. She is just launching her new book today. Yes, today is her official launch date, so we'll have to congratulate her. And her new book is called Goodbye Perfect: How to Stop Pleasing, Proving, and Pushing for Others and Live for Yourself. Welcome, Homaira.
Thank you, Monica. It is so nice to be here. I am really looking forward to our conversation.
Well, great. And I think we should start from like the very beginning. And why is it that perfectionism is such a pervasive problem for people, particularly for women around the world?
Yeah, I love this question. I love this question because, it's like diving straight into the deep end. Why is it? And in like the very short answer is lack of self-worth, of feelings of lack. And the thing is that there is nothing inherent in us. There's absolutely nothing. We are not hardwired for perfection, any of us. We are hardwired for growth. That is what we want as human beings. We are hardwired for growth. We are hardwired for growth, for actualizing our potential. It is the same potential that exists in a seed. It's hardwired to grow into an oak tree. Every living organism has that. The same way we are hardwired to actualize our potential. But what that needs, what that growth needs is feelings of belonging. That is the very first need. Even when a child enters the world, that is the very first need we have. So the growth needs feelings of belonging. Now, a lot of us don't have those feelings of belonging. That is a sense of inner safety. It does not necessarily mean belonging, having a huge following or having many friends. It is a feeling of inner safety when you're around people. It's an inside job. And when we don't have those feelings of deep-seated belonging to ourselves, then we become dependent on external approval. And, in Western societies, perfection is such a prevalent thing. It's valued, it's rewarded. And so we just become dependent on perfection as a way of feeling good about ourselves, as a way of feeling that sense of belonging, as a way of rewarding ourselves and feeling that we are growing. But eventually it just gets us stuck. Even if it doesn't get us stuck, it leads for often a miserable experience. We're always a hard taskmaster to ourselves instead of experiencing the joy and the happiness that comes when we're growing and we're learning new things and we're moving in a direction that feels meaningful to us.
So where do you start? So that makes me wonder if you start with trying to gain a sense of belonging, or is it like, are you developing your confidence? And are those the same thing?
Oh, you're asking such awesome questions. So the thing is that when I began my postgrad research, I wasn't even thinking about confidence. I really set out to study women's flourishing. What does it take for women to flourish? Because I'd been coaching for a while. And, not only in my own personal life, but even with the women I was coaching, this would often come up. Like, these were brilliant, competent, conscientious women, but everybody was just trying harder, killing themselves over things, not even feeling terribly happy, even when they arrived where they wanted to arrive. Now it was the next task, and all imposter syndrome, self-doubt. It just wasn't getting better. And so I really wanted to understand, what does it take for women to flourish, to feel that joy, to feel the excitement, new venues, keep moving ahead. And what I learned was that again, like I said, we are hardwired to flourish. What gets in the way is fragile confidence, a form of confidence, a form of high confidence that's called fragile confidence. And fragile confidence is dependent on external feedback. And the kind of confidence that is tied to flourishing, that allows us to flourish, is called optimal confidence. And the only difference between the two is deep-seated feelings of goodness within ourselves. So a deep-seated feeling, it doesn't necessarily need to be in our heads, but a deep-seated feeling that we are worthy and valuable for who we are, and that what we have, what it takes to meet whatever challenges we face in the pursuit of our goals. And so building confidence is really about building those deep-seated feelings of goodness, worth, value for who we are, and that we have what it takes to meet the challenges in pursuit of our worthwhile goals. And so it's not that we can just plant those feelings into ourselves. We have to take the actions, but those actions have to be aligned with who we are. And to really know who we are and what we want, we have to do the work of belonging. So it's really a journey. I call it the pyramid. It's like I say there's a Maslow's pyramid, and then there's a good, bad, perfect pyramid. And that pyramid begins from the very bottom layer, which is belonging to ourselves, goes on to the layer of belonging with others, knowing how do we create those relationships of give and take where we feel worthy, but we can also provide the space for other people to grow in our lives. And from there, we move on to understanding what's my authentic nature, what is my purpose, and then the final layer, which is courage, to go out and live with courage and be who we are in a world that doesn't make it easy. So that is the journey of the book, to take that journey. And to your question, where does it all begin? I think it all begins with self-awareness, meeting ourselves where we are.
It's really, like you strike a chord when you talk about the fragile confidence, because it does feel so good to get those positive affirmations externally. And I feel like we are raised in a society where we're constantly looking for that, whether it's our teachers getting a gold star in your piano class, like whatever it is, it does feel good. And because we are hardwired to flourish, I think that is, like part of that whole cycle. But it's interesting to not get too caught up in that. So let's talk a little bit more about that difference of developing a more solid sense of confidence versus that fragile confidence. And how do you take those steps?
Yeah, exactly. So, what was really eye-opening for me was that fragile confidence and optimal confidence can look very similar on the outside. You could be having a lot of the same successes. You could be taking a lot of the same actions. You could be meeting a lot of the same people, whatever it is. But the difference lies in that, again, that deep-seated feeling that we have, that sense that we have, the sense of trust that we have in ourselves, plus how we feel as we're pursuing our goals. The journey of fragile confidence is often called insecure striving. We experience stress, and there's unhappiness when things don't go our way. There's comparison, a lot of social comparison, there's shame, there's depression, all of that, the package. And with optimal confidence, it is just a far more easier ride, in the sense that, yes, to your point, we do feel happy when we receive praise. I mean, we are hardwired for that too. We are human beings. We are social creatures. We all look for praise. We all like it when we get it, but we aren't hooked by it. If we don't get it, it doesn't say anything about our sense of self. It doesn't derail us.
So how do you unhook?
How do you unhook? You begin with creating that deep-seated sense of belonging to yourself. That is the very first thing that you need to do. Without that, you cannot belong in your relationships. Without that, you cannot own your strengths. Without that, you cannot have courage. In one simple word, although it is more, it gets complicated when you try to put it into practice, but in one simple word, it's all about self-compassion. About recognizing that as human beings, we are brilliant and we are faulty and we have weaknesses, and we will say things that don't make us proud, and we will do things that don't make us proud, and that we need our own forgiveness. And to be able to do that in those moments is easier said than done.
Mm-hmm. You mean like if you're triggered in a conversation, say, and it's bringing up a flood of emotions, like how do you manage that? Is that what you're referring to?
I'm referring to, and that too, but what I'm really referring to is maybe you feel jealous, or maybe you snapped at somebody and you said something that you later regret. Or maybe, our self-worth is so tied to our actions as well. Maybe you failed at a presentation, somebody criticized it. Maybe, I'm doing this Zoom meeting right now and it doesn't go the way I wanted to go. And I feel I should have done something better. And instead of beating down on myself, beating down on ourselves, say, okay, I went out there, I did the best I could. These were the good moments that actually happened. And good on you for doing that kind of thing. Like be with ourselves the way we would be with somebody we love, the way we would be with a child. I mean, we are all now. Nobody is really going to come around and do that to us now, right? So it is really on us. Because if you really think about it, Monica, we have this voice that is chattering on all the time in our heads, right? We all have it. We can't let go of it. It's like, thank you, evolution, or whatever you want to call it. It's there. But what's it saying to you? And for most of us, that voice is just either criticizing us, or it is torturing us and pushing us and comparing to others and just somehow reminding us that we fell short in some way, or that we need to do more, or that we aren't on top of our game, or whatever it is, right? And in some little moments, it may reward us as well, but only because we did what we were meant to do.
It is amazing how powerful language is. And how do women commonly undermine themselves with language? And how do you break that cycle of using negative language in your self-talk?
Yes, and women undermine themselves with language in many ways. And so there are different reasons for that. So one, obviously, there's the criticism, right? And that is a lot of the times it's just, the criticism that we've grown up with, whether we've grown up with it, children, the way we learn to speak to ourselves is obviously a reflection of the way we were spoken to. It always is. That is, what does the child learn, right? And so those variants necessarily have to be harsh or critical. It can just be, there's no love and compassion there. There's no kindness there. It could just be, whatever you did, what you did, and okay, move on to the next thing. It could be whatever, but that compassion is extremely important for us to feel seen, for us to feel loved. And that is the voice of kindness that we need to start building within ourselves. So one of the first things I say to people is just bring an image to mind of somebody who spoke to you like that. We all have that, it could be a grandma, it could be a friend's mom who used to speak to her child like that when you were little and you liked it. It could be something, a fictional character, maybe you read it in a storybook. It could be anything. Whatever it is, it could even be a pet of yours, it really doesn't matter, but a compassionate image who speaks to you in a way that you feel good. And then just try every single day. It's a practice to speak to yourself like that. When you get up in the morning and you look at yourself in the mirror, say something kind to yourself. I do it. It feels corny, but then one day I thought, I never feel embarrassed saying nasty things to myself. Why am I thinking this is such a bad thing after all, right? So do that. The more you practice that voice, the more it'll come to you when you need it the most, which is when you've actually done something which you feel bad about. So, which we all will, right? We are human beings. There will be times when we make mistakes. So build that voice, because the more you build that voice, instead of arguing with your inner critic, because that is, I think, one of the things that we need to stop doing. Because the more we argue with that critical voice, the more we are strengthening its neural pathways. We are just going round and round in the same pathway. Instead of that, we just start building a new pathway in our brain, one of more compassion, kindness, understanding. And so old pathways die. I mean, in psychology, they always say neurons that wire together, fire together. And so the less we engage with those and the more we engage with these, that is who we become over time.
Yeah, that is just so important. And I think I remember you have your own meditation practice, don't you?
Yeah, for me, it's just mindfulness and being, kind.
And do you incorporate some of these affirmations in your meditation practice? And is that a good strategy for our audience?
So yeah, there are tons of things you can do. So one is just a self-compassion meditation. The other is a loving kindness meditation. All of them are great, and there are brilliant ones. There's one by Sharon Salzberg. She's like a very big meditation. She talks about loving kindness all the time. There's Barbara Fredrickson. There's Kristen Neff, who's done so much work on self-compassion. The one I am talking about, the compassionate image, it comes from Paul Gilbert, Sir Paul Gilbert. He has the Compassionate Mind Foundation in the UK, and he talks about this compassionate image and how we need to get better at just changing the way we talk ourselves on a daily basis, just the way you talk, the way you walk, the way you sit down, the way you're getting, starting your work. Just say something kind to yourself before that. You finish work, say something kind to yourself after that. Even while you're working, say something nice to yourself. Just basically just building those pathways. It can be fun. It's honestly fun because it's so relieving as well to just know that I can actually say these things and just, instead of pushing myself all the time. And there is a place for pushing, but there always has to be a base that we return to. And normally we don't have a secure base to return to.
I almost said practice makes perfect, but I guess that wouldn't be a good thing, would it? We don't need to be perfect.
Yeah, practice makes you closer to perfection.
Yes, and so the name was Sir Paul Gilbert. Can you repeat what his methodology is? What did you call it?
It's called the compassionate image. I think that's what he calls it. The compassionate.
Explore the compassionate. Image. Okay.
Yeah,
we'll put that in the notes.
Yes.
Okay, so how about...
And it's at the Compassionate Mind Foundation. I think that's the URL.
Compassionate Mind Foundation. Okay, great, thank you. You talk a lot about women reclaiming second stage of their careers. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of research on women's leadership where they talk about the first, second, third stages of our careers. And the second stage is when a woman moves from the more junior level to perhaps becoming a manager. And now she's also responsible for a team, a small team, perhaps for the first time, right? So from being just about putting your head down, working away, in charge only of, being competent at what you're doing. Now relationships also come into the picture. Now you have to manage other people. You have to learn how to set boundaries. You have to learn how to delegate tasks. You have to learn how to communicate. You have to learn how to ask for what you want from other people. And all of these are areas that women can struggle with, and sometimes for very good reason as well, because women do walk this double bind in the workplace, that if they're too nice, if they're nice, they're seen as too nice. If they're assertive, they're seen as aggressive, and all of those things. So for very good reasons, women can struggle with it, but a lot of us just struggle with it because we just learned to be pleasers from the moment that we were born, right? And so that second stage in a woman's career can be difficult for women in the workplace for that reason. At home, it's also the time when perhaps they're starting families or their families are growing a little bit. So there is more work and challenges there. They call it the double bind of motherhood and management. right? And it could also be other caregiving roles, parents, in-laws, etc. So there's just a lot coming at women from so many angles. And one of the best ways to navigate that period that can go on for quite a long time is self-care. And when I say self-care, it is not just, what it's touted to be in our marketing industries, which tell us it's all about candles and massages, which it definitely can be, but it's so much more than that, because we are not only a physical self. There's also the emotional self. There's also what I sometimes call the soulful self, because that part of us, there's a part of us when we get to that second stage of our careers that's also looking for meaning through our work. Work is not only a source of financial stability, it's also a source of meaning. And so workplaces that encourage people to go and find meaning in their work are doing them a huge service. Although workplaces are sometimes really afraid to have those kinds of conversations, because they think if we talk about purpose, our employees will leave. They'll find purpose somewhere else. And all the research shows that that's not the reality. We usually choose where we are working and we like the work we do, except that it's not providing us a sense of purpose and that meaning. And if we can build that into the work that we're doing, then it becomes so much more joyful.
In that process, you mentioned that as women in the workplace, we are so self-aware of like our tone, and we don't want to come across as being too aggressive. And so it's always this kind of like worrying about how your message is perceived. Do you have recommendations for how to find just your authentic voice in a business setting, that you can show up authentically and just be yourself in your management role?
Yes. Yeah. So this is also an awesome question. So, I found, so when I was doing my coaching work, a lot of the women would come to me as they were rising in seniority, and they would say, you know what, I have been told by my boss that I'm too aggressive and I need to tone down my assertiveness. Or they would come and say, I've been told I'm too nice and I need to tone down my niceness. And that never works, because in a way, we're telling people to be not authentic. And how can anyone ever stand in their power when they're not being authentic, right? So what I found, and this was like amazing when I found that, was this skill. You may want to also add that to the chat for your listeners. It's called the Thomas Kilmann model. It's a conflict resolution model that he created. Thomas Kilmann, Killman. And his conflict resolution model has these two axes, which is empathy and assertiveness. And what that model shows is that when we're low in empathy and low in assertiveness, we avoid situations. When we're low in empathy and we're high in assertiveness, we can come across as competitive. When we're high in empathy, low in assertiveness, we accommodate. And when we are medium empathetic and medium assertive, which is a lot of the advice that women often get, we just compromise, and nobody's happy in a compromise situation. It at least doesn't get us what we want. It at least doesn't show us to be the leaders that we want to be. But the highest form of communication, which is called collaboration, is when we are both high in empathy and high in assertiveness. And that is awesome for women because we are naturally empathetic. And so we don't have to tone down anything. We can actually carry it as a badge of honor. This is our strength. So we can be as empathetic as we need to be, as long as we're also assertive. And even that we know how to be when we need to be. In workplace situations, we sometimes have I sometimes call them our safety blankets, which is like all these ways that we undermine our message with needless apologies, needless qualifying little phrases like, I just want to say this, and can I just say this? All of those things, if we can just start becoming aware of our language and practice speaking without those undermining little phrases, then our message can be that much more powerful.
I think that is so important. I find myself doing that all the time. It's like you're qualifying what you're about to say, and it's just so unnecessary. but I think that it's really common with women in the workplace, and it would be great to start changing that. I am curious about, like if you are encouraging your team or friendships or family, how can you encourage others to follow these practices as well? Are there easy things that you can say to like a group that you're working with, a team that you're on, so that you can reach collaboration and you're not stopped by other people's insecurities as well?
Okay. So how do you encourage others on your team to also be assertive and empathetic? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. Like, how do you reach collaboration?
How do you reach collaboration? Okay.
Yeah. Since it takes more than one person to collaborate.
Yes, definitely. So that is where the empathy aspect of it comes in, because empathy is really about listening without judgment. Right? So when we are empathetic, we have to listen and show the other person that we're listening. We have to make them feel seen, because that, again, is one of the core human needs. We can't deny that, whether we're in a workplace setting, whether we're talking to our child, whatever we're doing. So we have to show the other person we're listening. A lot of body language can do that. The way we sit, we look the other person in the eye, we lean forward, we repeat what they're saying just to make sure that they feel that, they were heard properly. We ask questions to get clarity. So first and it is very important for us too, because we understand their position. And so we know what is important to them, so that we can ask for what we want in a way that is a win-win, rather than a, win-lose, like you win or I lose. It's not like that. So we show that empathy, we listen carefully. That is the one aspect. And then the other is be very clear on what you want. A lot of us aren't. We jump into a conversation without really knowing, what do I really want here? And also for women sometimes, because we have never really explored what do I really want. We have been like, this is what you need to do, this is what's right for you, etc., etc. Sometimes we're not that connected with what we want. Just having that clarity, what do I want? Why do I want it? Why is it important to the other person? And just those kinds of questions. So a little bit of that prep work before that would really help us then speak in a way and ask for what we want in a way that the other person will know why it is important. Always when you're making an ask, make sure that the other person knows what's in it for them.
That's just beautiful. Such a good reminder. And Kathy, you're absolutely right. It's like that body language is so important. And pausing, like you described, Homaira, it's just like to really understand what your motivations are going into a conversation are also so helpful. But even if it's just taking that deep breath in between, when you're having a conversation, can be so helpful to kind of get some clarity on what you want out of it. So yeah, that's beautiful. And Janice, thank you so much for putting this great question in here. And I'm just going to read it for you. While we are practicing self-worth, self-compassion, is there anything we can do, practically speaking, to become more aware of what we're doing is good enough and to stop trying to achieve perfection? Thank you so much, Janice.
Thank you, Janice. So as we're practicing self-compassion, how do we become aware of the fact that we're pushing ourselves too hard? Is that the question?
Yeah, I guess, just speaking personally, I tend to go all in, have a lot of need for affirmation of being the best and doing it to the best of my ability. And without sounding too emotional, I kill myself all the time. And I'm starting to think about pulling back as a, because I think some things are just good enough. And I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts about that as well.
Yes, thank you so much for clarifying that. So, it's an awesome question, and it really helps those of us who are very hooked by perfection And I find that one of the most important things, so yeah, we all have these hacks. We can all say, I mean, all the good old advice, know what 80% looks like and just be happy there, et cetera, know when you stop, just have clarity on what does the end product look like, et cetera, which is just good enough. But I find that the place where women tend to struggle the most is that it's the emotion of letting it go at that. Because yes, maybe you've said, okay, this is good enough, but stepping back from that and just leaving it there just brings up a lot of emotional angst. You just keep going back to it. You don't feel good. And even if you leave it at that, you don't feel happy. Is that, do you relate with that a little bit?
Yeah,
I
because I do question, like, is it good enough? So
Okay.
it is, like you said, sometimes a little hard to leave it there. And I try to say good enough is good enough.
Okay.
So yeah,
So
can
I think
relate.
a few things that would help is one, know what good enough looks like, because now because obviously when we are trying to be perfect, we have this ideal of what that perfect looks like, and all, obviously it keeps shifting, but even so, we just keep going at it. Know what the end product looks like, what is good enough, know what good enough looks like, because now that becomes your new perfect. If you're really hooked on the idea of perfect, it's really excellence for you now. So you say, okay, this is what my excellent product looks like, and this is what's good enough. Having that kind of discernment to know where is 80% good enough and where is 100% good enough. And
That's
then
good.
the other thing would be, after you've done that, you just say, okay, what am I moving on to then next? What is next? So that you're not sitting there and just saying, should I go back to it and fix it a little more? Just move on to something joyful after that. What will I do once I'm done? Like, will I go spend time with my child? Will I, whatever, go watch a movie, whatever it is. And if it's the emotional thing, like you're getting a lot of emotional anxiety about it, then just have a few coping mechanisms that help you ride the wave of the emotion, because it will go eventually. You just need to be able to ride that wave while it is high.
Yeah, very helpful. Thank you.
It makes me wonder about goal setting. And is goal setting a positive exercise, or can you get a little bit too caught up in the results?
It is a positive exercise if that goal is aligned with what you really want.
That's beautiful.
Because yeah, and we can't get too caught up on what exactly it will look like, because especially when we're talking about our potentials, it has to grow into something. We just have a vision, we have an aspiration, we have a certain desire. So we have to get as married to that desire as possible, and then get down to the work, because that desire will pull us when things get tough, which they will. So have that desire, have clarity on that desire, put it up somewhere you see it often, because that will become your pull force. But then it comes down to the daily work. How do I bring back the joy into it? How do I keep looking after myself as I'm going through it? There's the energy triangle that is, this is the work of Jim Loehr at the Optimal Performance Institute, OPI. And he talks about these 4 layers of energy. And the first layer is physical, and they build on each other. And the first layer is physical, so looking after, obviously, our sleep, et cetera. And if you really think about each layer, we really don't look, even the most basic layer, physical, we lacking in that as well, with our phones and all of these different messaging of what we should be doing. So the bottom layer, physical. Then emotional. So are we looking after our emotional energy, or are we saying critical things to ourselves all the time, et cetera, whatever's bringing us down? Or do we have a positive mindset? Are we looking after our joy? Are we doing all of those things? Emotions. How much positive emotion are you experiencing in your day? The third level is the mental energy. So have you taken on too much? Do you need to prioritize? Are you going after perfection? Because that, again, is draining your mental energy. You need to stop at some point. So know that comparison, all of those drain our mental energy. And then the top layer is spiritual energy. It is Are you using your strengths? Are you doing things in a way that is inherently you? Are you being authentic in your pursuits, or are you trying to do things in how other people are doing them? If you are, if you are launching your book, for example, are you trying to follow all the processes that everyone tells you this is what you should do because this is how you'll become a bestseller, this is how, etc.? Or are you also experiencing the joy and doing things in a way that feel good to you, and you are living as you are trying to get to where you want to?
Yeah, I would love to know your perspective on your book writing process. I mean, today you're launching your book. It's a major milestone. How did you feel during the process? Did you ever question yourself about like what your motivations were to write a book? And like, how did you grapple with all of your own emotions going through this major undertaking?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for this question, because I've thought about it often. No one's asked me that before, but I was very clear on what I wanted. I really had felt the pain, not only my own pain, but the pain of the women that I was working with, coaching. And I knew that this was important. I had a very clear vision of what a world would look like where women were kinder to themselves, where they were doing the kind of work that brought them alive, what kind of fulfillment it would be for them, and what kind of difference that they could make to the world. Because, our potentials are there as our contribution to the world. And we don't do anyone any service if we keep beating down on ourselves. This is stuff that we've been given and we need to give it back. So that part of it was very clear for me. It wasn't that I ever doubted the work. But yes, I did get caught up in comparison. Yes, I did get caught up in, is this good enough? Yes, I did get caught up in, why would anyone want to read this? Or all of that. Yes, I mean, I often say, I write it in the book as well, even our must goals can become should goals when we just begin the process. So we always have to keep checking back with ourselves and say, what was the initial reason that drove me to this? And where is my joy? And am I following my joy? And where can I bring more kindness? And how can I make it more fun? And Monica, since you've asked, I'll share this. There were days when I would actually, and this was during COVID when I was writing the book, and I was in a little room because all my kids had come home. It was a little apartment that we were in Toronto at the time. And I didn't even have a window in my room. It wasn't the most exciting room. And so I would bring joy simply by putting lipstick and wearing high heel shoes and pretending I was there sitting like an author, bring my glasses down onto my nose and just bring a little fun into it, because sometimes that's what we need to do.
That is such a great visual that you would be putting on lipstick or high heels or whatever for yourself, like entirely for yourself.
Yeah.
Even if no one is going to see you. I just adore that image. Thank you for sharing that. It makes me wonder why you started the Goodbye Perfect project. And I think, you probably just answered it by the same reason you wrote this book, but will you talk a little bit about your project?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really going to put all my attention into it once the book launch is over. But yeah, that again is something that's really meaningful to me. I want to create a community which is accessible, free for everyone to be able to come and find a place where we can just let go of this fix me project. I call it the fix me project that we've been on, or that we've been put on all these years and decades, because of a world that is very top down in its approach. And I want a place where we can be bottom up in our approach, where we always begin with compassion because we are pursuing something that is so important in our lives. It is really about flourishing. The Goodbye Perfect project is, how do I say goodbye to this need to perfect all the time, to this need to please? How do I build the kind of self-worth? The name of the book is not Goodbye Perfection. It is Goodbye Perfect. It is about changing our identity, learning to own who we are, embrace who we are, love who we are, because that is the key step to being able to actualize our full potential. So this is a place where I want people to come, talk about what's working for them, cheer each other on, and just build a community where we are lifting as we are rising.
That's so nice. What is one thing we could all do today that would help break the cycle of perfectionism?
Recognize that voice in your head and bring some humor around it, bring some distance, create some distance from it, which is why in the book, I begin with the work of self-awareness. Understand why you have this voice, because that helps us create distance. Otherwise, that voice sounds the truth. And unless we can create some distance from it, it is very difficult to argue with it all the time. It can be extremely convincing. It is trying to protect us. And to protect us, it will go to any length. So if we can just understand why that voice exists, how does it talk to us, and create distance from it, then we have that place of freedom from which we can make our choices. So just understand, listen to that voice in your head and see what's it doing to you. If it's helping you, awesome. You're already a good way ahead. And if it's not, then just start creating some distance from it. I mean, create an image in your mind of somebody who's just yapping away needlessly, and you can laugh at it. It can be a funny image. You can bring fun around it. Or you can just simply just distance yourself and say, I know you're there. I know you're trying to protect me, but I'm fine. I'll figure out what I need to do.
It's really interesting. At the beginning of our conversation, you were talking about the importance of the sense of belonging. And when I'm thinking about bringing greater self-awareness, like today, like if I'm walking away from this conversation, I get off this Zoom call and I try to be self-aware, I might not have made that jump that one of our key drivers is a sense of belonging in life. And I think that's such an important thing to be aware of, because it is true. And I disassociate the desire to belong and how that fits in with my strive for perfectionism. So I think that's really important. And I really appreciate you exploring that concept. We do have a lovely question from the audience. Where, who, and what in your life, Humaira, how did you find your wisdom?
Oh, thank you for that question. I found that wisdom, as many of us do, by going through experiences, reflecting on those, and trying to understand what role did they play in my life and what are they trying to teach me. I'll share it here because I do write about it in my book. Very early on in my life, when I was about 13, I struggled with an eating disorder. And it took me many years to recover from that. But even when I had recovered from the eating disorder, I was still trying to be perfect in other areas of my life, trying to be, even before the eating disorder, I was actually a perfect student. I was a perfect child, a perfect daughter. And then for different reasons, my father had moved to a different country. I could no longer be that perfect student. We now had to do all of our education in French, et cetera, couldn't deal with that, the fact that I wasn't top of the class anymore. And so that led to the eating disorder, because suddenly this was one place, my body was one place where I could have control over and be as perfect as I wanted to be. And then when the eating disorder left, then it was trying to be a perfect university student, then a perfect employee, then a perfect mother, then a perfect wife, mother, whatever order you can go in. And it just became too much. And then I realized that this is exactly how I had been living my life, jumping from one area of perfection to the other. And I needed to understand what it was. How could I free myself from all of that? Which is when I went into my studies of positive psychology, the science of flourishing. What is flourishing? Because I felt I hadn't overcome the biggest challenge of my life, which was the eating disorder. It had felt like a huge win to overcome that, because when I was in the midst of it, I was that close to death so many times. And I felt that I was alive for a bigger reason now. And so when I went into that research, I understood that my confidence was always dependent on an area of my life. And unhooking myself from that just led to really understanding who I was, what did I want in the world, what was my purpose, and Yeah, you can call that wisdom.
Thank you so much for being vulnerable. That is really meaningful. It makes me think about, like, with eating disorders in particular, that sense of wanting control. And is that a common emotional response for perfectionists? Like, is wanting to be able to control one aspect of your life kind of a common theme with people that you work with?
Yes, because it gives them that sense of self. It makes us, them, whoever, feel worthy. And that is the most important thing. I mean, how can we live with ourselves if we don't even have a sense of self-worth? We can't. And so controlling certain areas of our life, being perfect in them, allows us to feel worthy. And that is the biggest need. We cannot carry on. If we are worthless, we are worthless. I mean, we would just close down in shame, never want to step out. And so that is what allows us to keep going, unfortunately, in a direction which is disconnecting us from ourselves.
Well, this has been such a beautiful conversation. Are there any last questions from the audience? Or
I saw something pop up, and it went before I could really read it. I think it was, the person's name was Sue. And when I was talking about that inner voice is trying to protect you, and I think she asked, protect you from what? And that's a great question. And it's protecting you from criticism. It's protecting you from people shaming you, or from you failing, or whatever those things can be. And for whatever reason, I mean, there is a biological, we are wired for protection. So there is that biological instinct. But then there is also the fact that perhaps you did receive criticism at some point for whatever, and that is just stayed with you. And so, we just need to then work with that. We need to bring up compassionate awareness to that. So the self-awareness work, and then say, what is the criticism telling me? So remove the moral judgment, remove the person from the criticism, and then be able to work with the criticism.
Yeah, that's really important. And your self-criticism, right?
Exactly.
And I had a direct question from someone about ways to stop yourself from saying sorry all the time. And I know that I have this habit too of apologizing. And is it some sense of feeling guilty, or like just not being good enough? But how do you observe this, people saying they're sorry a lot? And what are some ways to stop yourself from doing that?
Yeah, I mean, people can say sorry for a couple of key reasons. So one is, yes, you do feel that you're overstepping your boundaries, and so you're apologizing for whatever, and that is more the inner work that we need to do. And then sometimes that sorry could just be because you're trying to tone down your message because you don't want to come across as too aggressive or too whatever, and that is the messages that we receive from society of how women should be. So first, know why you're saying that sorry. Do you genuinely feel that you're overstepping your boundaries, you're asking for something you don't deserve, etc., which will require the inner work? Or is it just a habit that you've developed just because you feel that this is what will make your message more acceptable to the other person? And then practice. I mean, just try to say that sentence without a sorry. It will feel so weird, but practice. I mean, practice in front of the mirror, practice with somebody, a dear friend, tell her, this is what I'm working on, please help me. Just be mindful that you don't replace the sorry with another needless qualifier. That is what you have to be mindful of.
That is a great tip. And I do think that we should all commit to each other that we're going to get off this call and we're going to say something nice to ourselves today before we start the day. Sound good?
I love it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your morning. And this is such a special morning for you. Congratulations again on the launch of your book. We will be ordering it for sure. And again, just thank you for your grace, your vulnerability. And I really wish you the best of luck.
Thank you, Monica. It's been a true joy. I have loved spending my launch day here with all of you. I really hope you're walking away with some little thing that will make your life better, and just
Aw.
keep doing it consistently. That's the most important thing, because sometimes we just forget, there are little things that make a huge difference over time. And we sometimes think they're so little, why bother? But that is exactly what makes a huge difference.
Yep. Practice, practice, practice. Get those neural pathways going. So yes, thank you so much.